TLC guide, you have your outline for today's activities, and we're going to be working through this together for the most part, just from beginning to end. If you have any questions at any time, please stop, ask. It's meant to be, and my intention is this be more of a conversation between us, because like you, I'm in the classroom every single day. I have learned by doing this 10 core opportunity, I have learned more from fellow teachers than I've learned in any other professional development that I've ever had the privilege of attending. So how we learn, I feel, as teachers is by talking with one another. So please, as we're going through, stop. If you have anything to add, if you've had things, I know Joni was in some of our trainings over the summer, so if you have something that you've used in your classroom that you see that's beneficial to share with the group, please do so. And in order to get everyone accustomed to speaking with the mic and with the camera, so let's go around, because I do know a lot of your names, but I don't know a lot of your faces. Haven't had the opportunity to work with you guys very much in the past because we are so big and we do have so many schools and so many K through 2 teachers. Like Stacia said, my name is Christy Grubb and I teach at Sevierville Primary. This is my 20th year. I'm just finishing my 20th, and I started in first grade. I taught first grade for 7 years, and then I moved to kindergarten 13 years ago. So, and as it's not a big surprise, what I'm teaching now is what I was teaching when I started 20 years ago. So my curriculum really hasn't changed that much in looking at going from being a first grade teacher to a kindergarten teacher. So I've had a lot of experience with this level of cognitive knowledge and such. But it has, all that I have been exposed to through the 10 core training has really impacted my teaching more than anything I've ever done. So I'd like to share that with you. What I'm doing is I'm taking 7 days of full day trainings and condensing those into 2 hours. So we're going to cover a lot of material, but what I wanted to do is, as a classroom teacher, I wanted to take away all of those things that I feel like are my greatest takeaways that I gleaned from being in that training and from being a facilitator, and share that with you. So if you want to start right here, if you'll tell me your school, your name, and maybe your years of experience or something like that, just to share out so we all kind of know who we are and where we're coming from.
I'm Joni Schuler. I teach kindergarten at Catlettsburg, and I'll be finishing up my 7th year.
Casey Wasecki from Sevierville Primary, 2nd grade, and my 15th year. Tracy Dodgen, Warewood Elementary School, 13 years in 3rd grade and 16 years in 2nd grade. So,
Very good. Back table.
Alicia Hunter, Jones Cove Elementary School. I'm finishing up my 20th year, and I've taught from pre-K to 3rd.
All right. So we're right in there together.
Jessica Riley, I teach at Northview Primary in 1st grade. This is my 2nd year.
Okay.
I'm Donna Huff. I teach 2nd grade at Pittman Center. I have taught for 23 or 24 years, and I've taught 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, library, and computer.
Wow.
But 2nd is my favorite.
All right.
Hey, I'm Sarah Cheek. I teach at Pi Beta Phi in Gatlinburg, K1 looping teacher, and I will be entering my 9th year of teaching next year.
I'm Brittany Huff. I teach at Trula Lawson Developmental Kindergarten, and this is my 4th year.
All right.
I'm Dawn Sutton. I teach at Pigeon Forge Primary, and this is my 10th year. I did 6 years in 1st grade and now in 2nd.
I'm Rebecca Lewis. I currently teach 1st grade at New Center, and I think this is my 16th year. Taught pre-K, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd.
Right. Perfect.
I'm Samantha McCarter. I teach at Kettenstadt Elementary. This is my 15th or 16th year. I taught all but 1 year when I was a 3rd grade teacher, the rest were kindergarten.
All right.
I'm Sonia Canadian. I'm from Boys Creek. I think I've been doing it for about 18 years. I've taught kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 6th grade for a couple of days, and then now I'm back in 1st grade.
So I was trying to keep up, but of course I did not do a very good job. How many kindergarten teachers are there? Raise your hand. Okay, so we've got 4. And then 1st grade? All right, and 2nd grade. So fairly equally distributed. I'm hoping that this will have the same impact for you guys who are in 2nd as it does for us who are in kindergarten, because of course my frame of reference is kindergarten. So I'm coming at this as a kindergarten teacher. What we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at our strengths, because as self-contained K2 teachers, we have those 2 major subject areas that we really concentrate on, and that's ELA and that's math. And so as we are looking at those two subject areas, I would just like for you to do a quick inventory. Just think very quickly off the top of your head, what would you consider your strengths to be? Because I feel like that we all have that. Historically, that's something that I considered myself one as a stronger area than the other. So if you feel like that ELA is your strength, raise your hand. If you feel that math is your strength, raise your hand. And that's normally what we see. In K2, most of us feel that we're stronger in ELA than we are in math. And that's something, and that's what I always thought as well. For years and years, all the times that they would come and do my observations and all those things, I was always trying to gear it to where it would be an ELA evaluation because I always felt like I did so much better in that area. So, why? Look at those next lines, and you see 3 reasons or aspects that make this discipline a strength for you. Why do you think that you're stronger in those areas? If you want to jot something down quickly, why is ELA something that you feel more confident in teaching? Is there something about it that you feel like makes it easier for you to teach, or that you feel like that makes it an area of strength? Or if it's math, why do you feel that? So if you'll jot those down, we're going to share those out really quickly. And this would be a time in your training at your school, if you want to take just a moment to stop the video, take just a moment to think about these things as well. That would be very advantageous. So who would like to tell someone ELA? What are some strengths that you see or reasons you see that ELA is an easier discipline for you, or something that you feel more confidently?
I really enjoy it just because of the whole love of reading and books, and there's never enough time to read all the books and share everything. So
Right.
I enjoy that part of it.
Just because of what you like to do.
And the vocabulary, and just, that's what I enjoy.
Right. Who
I
else?
was always intimidated by math as a student.
Right.
When I was in school, it was not a strength for me, so I was a stronger reader.
Mhm.
So math was intimidating as
Right.
a student. It can be sometimes
As a
as
teacher.
well.
Yes. Anyone else?
It seems like more of the training I have had over the past 10 to 15 years
Mhm.
has been geared more toward ELA than that.
Right.
Looking back, I don't know if that was things I chose to do or
Right.
if it was more.
And I've noticed that too. As you look back on a lot of those things that we've had the opportunity, most of it is more geared towards ELA because we think of that as our goal as K2 teachers, especially now in kindergarten as we've moved so much of our curriculum and it's changed so much. That is our goal, is to make sure they enter first grade as good, strong readers, and to have that strong foundational knowledge. So anybody else? What about math? Those of you guys that are strong in math, why do you feel like that's a strength for you, or what do you like about that discipline?
I like it because I feel stronger because it's a visual, and I'm not very visually oriented. I did well in math in school and all. But I also like that I can use the manipulatives. I feel like they support their learning a lot better. And then the fact that there's more concrete ideas presented in math.
Whereas the other's more abstract.
A little more abstract
Right.
reading.
We had one more math person, right? Brittany,
Yes.
weren't you math?
Yes. I feel like that when I'm teaching math, like I can relate more everyday activities to math.
Right.
That they deal with every day. We count, we do all kinds of stuff. Calendar, everything relates back to math.
Just more life skill type
Yes.
activities. All right, great. There is an article, and just to give you an overview, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at fluency, all right? And what is fluency? Truly, what is fluency? Because there's a lot of disconnect in regards to what does that really mean, and how does that really manifest itself in our classrooms, and how does effective instruction look when we are trying to build that fluency in our very young students. So we're going to be looking at fluency, not just in math, but in reading as well. And what we want to do, and this is one of my big takeaways when I look at all the trainings that I've facilitated and all the trainings that I've attended, is I always saw myself very strongly as an ELA teacher, and I really had a lot of hesitation about math, just because I am more global and I am more artistic and all those kinds of things, and math really didn't seem that fun and and colorful and things to me for a long time. So that was something that I really shied away from, and of course I did everything that I needed to do in order to get them where I thought they needed to be. But as far as taking it and actually finding a love for math, I did not have that. Just in some of the activities that I've done over the last little while, in the last 2 years, and incorporating and changing my math curriculum, I have really found that love for math. And now, if I were given a choice, I would teach math. I love it that much. So I have just had so much of a change that I want to share with you guys. So if you look, and what we're going to be doing is looking how, if you have that strength in language arts, how a lot of those things that you love about language arts, you can incorporate those into your math instruction. If you love math, there's a lot of things you can do in math to build that same component of fluency in your language arts instruction. So we're going to look at how those are connected. And that's something that I never really realized until just the last 6 months or so, is how much of an overlap there is in those two disciplines, because I think historically we think of language as something that's very, one of the arts, and is very global and something that we love, and there's a lot of interpretation and all those kinds of things, and math is very concrete, whereas they do share a lot of similarities. So what I would like for you to do, and your homeschool, this would be a good time for you to pause as well, and when you look in your packet, you're going to find an article, and it's by Leadership Compass, and this is written by Marilyn Burns, who is one of the lead researchers as far as good instruction and math practices. Just read this and skim this quickly, because this is going to show you a bridge from reading to math, and just gives you some good background on where we're going with this training today. So who wants to share something that you found that was a relative, or that was maybe a big takeaway for you from reading the article in regards to the relationship between reading and math? Because as I said, our goal is to look at how those two disciplines are related and to use the strengths of one in order to build the other, because we don't really want to see ourselves just as strong in one area. We want to be strong in both areas, because our students do need to be fluent, as equally fluent in reading as they are in math, and vice versa. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Who wants to share out? What did you know?
First.
Okay, great.
The fact that she talked about the gatekeeper.
Right.
There being a gatekeeper in reading that they had to do, which was the decoding.
Right.
That is not existent in the math.
Right. Does anybody see something that could be used as a gatekeeper in math? Like for you strong mathematicians?
I think one of the biggest things is to get them to understand that the numbers and the processes represent something.
Right.
It's not just a symbol
Exactly.
there that tell, when they can make that connection between the word problem and how to solve that and which process to use, it's, that in itself is that comprehension part that
Right.
you mentioned, that there is the comprehension necessary.
And just like when we look for phonemic awareness to develop in our students in language arts, we know that they're actually getting somewhere when those sounds and those letters start to make a connection. That's the same thing that you're describing in math, when those numbers and the concept start to make a connection and they start to see the relationship between the two. So your visual and your understanding of those things have that connection. Anyone else?
I thought the idea of using the chart for math terminology
Yes.
was interesting, a math word wall, and then encouraging them to use the proper terminology for that, as opposed to, just the more slang terms for mathematical
Right,
terms, but
right.
encouraging them to use those big math words, just like we do in reading.
Exactly, because we're not always as intentional in math with our vocabulary and some of the terms that we use and those types of things as we are in language arts. Anyone else?
Thought the same thing, my word wall, I always say, look at the word wall, look
Right.
at the popcorn word. But we add the color words, we add everyone's name up there. And we do, like when you're teaching addition and subtraction, we make the chart, but I've never put the words up on the word wall.
Right,
Why not?
right. Perfect. Anyone else? Because this is our jump off. This is where we're going. If you look next on your outline, what you will see is what was the first fact that when I started 10 core training that pretty much blew me away. It said, as kindergarten teachers, which of course I have been for 13 years, counting and cardinality should comprise 65% of our instruction in mathematics. 65%. And should continue to be developed at a similar ratio in grades 1-2. So 65%, and I'm thinking, okay, let me reflect on my instruction and what I've done over the past several years. And when I think of counting and cardinality, I think, can they match a set to a number? And if so, and they can do that to the number 10, then we're good and we move on. Does anybody else share that as your conception? Anybody?
That's what I used to think when I
Exactly.
taught Saxon.
Exactly.
That's how the grade card was, the
Right.
counting and card, that one
Uh-huh.
assessment that we had, but
And we,
after going to 10 core, that's not all.
that's not all there is. And that's something I think that there's a huge misconception out there. There's a disconnect because we think, what is counting and cardinality? It's being able to match a number set to that written representation of that number. But it's actually so much more than that. And I thought, when I started with my 10 core training, there was a coach who had been there before, and she considered herself a math teacher, and I just thought she was the guru. And Mary Beth was her name, and she brought some samples of some things that her kids were doing at the end of kindergarten in regards to counting and cardinality, because my question was, how in the world can you spend that much time on counting and cardinality? There's no way. And so she showed me some things that her students were doing at the end of kindergarten, and I thought, well, that is unbelievable. There is no way, my students are ever going to be able to do those things. So once I became more involved in training and had more exposure and actually had this whole year to practice some of those things, that is why I have loved math. Because what you see in math, because that's what I said at my awards, I said, that's what I love about kindergarten, because what you see them do in kindergarten is incredible, because they come to you as non-readers and they leave as readers. And you don't see that in any other grade level, really. I mean, you see a lot of growth, but you don't see that metamorphosis, that true transformation. And that's what I've seen in math this year. And I've never seen that before, because I had students who came that didn't know numbers who are leaving as mathematicians, and true functioning mathematicians who understand numbers, who can manipulate equations. And it's amazing. It is truly amazing. So that's where I want us to be looking. List those teaching and learning strategies that you use in your classroom to introduce and extend the Common Core State Standards of Counting and Cardinality. So those of you, of course, and that's something that probably 1 and 2, because you don't have counting and cardinality as your standards. Those are only present in kindergarten. But if you think about things that you're doing that are going to help them build that sense of number in 1 and 2, list those quickly, and we'll take just about 2 or 3 minutes. Those of you in your home schools, you take a few minutes as well, and we'll stop the video, and this will give you a chance to reflect on those things as well. So just think about some of those activities, some of those strategies that you're doing in your classroom, and we'll share those out again. We'll be sharing a lot in the beginning, and then we're going to move a little more quickly as we go through. Everybody got some ideas? So share with us some activities, some strategies that you're using in your classroom to build that sense of number and that understanding of number, whether it be kindergarten, first, or second.
We do a lot of building on with the 120 chart.
All right, so building on, looking at that concept of...
That 10 more, 10 less, 1 more, 1 less, tearing it down and making puzzles out of it.
Right.
Things like that.
So a lot of base 10
Yeah.
is pretty much your focus when you're doing those type of activities, understanding how those numbers and how that pattern of numbers occurs, right?
That and how, and even with the smaller numbers, we will use the 10 frames
Right.
to build on and compare them.
And your first grade. Okay, that's what I thought. Who else? What about someone in second? What are you guys doing?
Still just building on what she's talking
Uh-huh.
about. I mean, each day, the student of the day has a number pattern that I give them a starting point with,
Mhm.
and then I make it more difficult throughout the week as we progress on, but just showing them that number pattern with the ones place, tens place, hundreds place. Now we're moving on into the thousand place
Right.
numbers. And it's so cool. I always tell them it's like the Plinko game on Price is Right, which
Right.
I'm older than them. They don't know about
Right,
the Price is
I
Right.
know Plinko.
But you know what I'm
Right.
saying. So then they're like, oh my gosh, I see that. And then it just falls into place.
Right. So, and place value.
Yes.
So a lot of place value
Yes.
instruction. And your second, is that
Second.
right? Okay.
Yes.
What about kindergarten? What are you guys doing in kindergarten?
I mean, we do place value with the number days in school. The
Right.
bucket chart, you get 10, you make the bundle of popsicle sticks.
you know, and then when they see that, especially when you're counting dimes, oh, it's like a dime, you know, it's like the bundle on our board, you know,
Right.
they're making that connection that there's 10 and 10, and then they have some left over, and then the domino game, I think,
Mm-hmm.
the flipping over, and then using that to add, you know, flipping it back over, how many did you see, and counting on from there.
Right. Very good. All right. Anybody else have anything you want to share in regards to that?
It's skip counting. I mean, one of the
Right.
things we taught skip counting in first grade.
Right.
And keep continuing in second grade, but making those connections as you're teaching it. What could we use this for? You know,
Right.
What can you do? And so you look for things. You know, let's skip count the pairs of shoes, and count the shoes by pairs. You know, desk groups. How many students? Count by desk groups. You know, rows in the cafeteria. You know, how many kids can fit in here and things like
Right,
that.
exactly. And so as we're looking at fluency, in order to be authentic and functioning mathematicians, all right, and that's what we want our students to be, they must possess math fluency. Must possess math fluency. So on that next line, and this would be another time that we're going to stop, and video will stop as well, and I just want you to take about 45 seconds to a minute to define what is fluency in regards to math. In your own words, what is fluency in regards to math? All right, who wants to share with us? What is fluency when we're talking about math? What is math fluency?
Being able to quickly recall and apply mathematical knowledge.
Okay, quickly apply and recall and apply. All right?
I think being able to identify and solve a mathematical problem that's being presented to them, even if it's something as simple as passing out papers or the snack.
Right.
You know, you need one per person, one correspondence, and then they can then tell me I need one more instead of I don't know.
Right.
You know, that's using their skills.
So a comprehension problem-solving approach is what you're thinking, and then you're thinking of efficiently. Is that what you said, right? Efficiently being able to solve those problems.
I teach second, for instance, when we go to count money, I would hope when we're counting nickels and dimes, they're not saying 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but
Right.
they can go 5, 10, 15, 20.
Right, exactly, exactly. Anyone else have something you want to share in regards to your definition? No? We're going to do a jigsaw activity, and what we're going to do, because when we think of math fluency, we do have some misconceptions. I had misconceptions about math fluency, and what is truly math fluency, and what does that mean, and how do we achieve that? As teachers, how do we get our students where they need to be in order that we can consider them fluent? Because we know what fluency looks like in reading, right? But what does it really look like in math? So I have 6 articles, but of course there's 5 groups. So I'm going to keep the first one, which is the big one, and I'll save it for myself. And I'm going to give you guys the little ones, and I just want you to read through them really quickly. Let's take about less than 5 minutes. These are very short. They won't take very long. And I want you to read through these articles. And after you do, we have some chart paper up here, and I would like for you to work with the people at your group and just quickly bullet the main points that you see in the article like we've done before. If you want to do a visual representation of a chart of some sort, that this is what fluency looks like. Maybe if you wanted to hang something up in your classroom just to give you an anchor chart of what my goal is, how would you do that? If you were trying to explain to someone else what is fluency, how would you do that? All right? And so we'll stop the video. It'll take about 5 minutes. And then when you are finished, we can get some chart paper, and then I just want you to just write that down quickly. So let's go ahead and start, and if you have yours up there, then you can share with us while the others are finishing theirs, and that way we'll be able to move on along. So if you did yours in the green, I'm not sure whose group that is, would someone like to go up please and share with us your... See, someone else gets to be on camera too.
Okay, we have that fluency is efficient and accurate methods for computing, flexibility, efficiency instead of speed, and not memorization.
All right. And blue?
Well, the core in mathematics is reasoning. Their big focus was it's not just computation. it's reasoning skills. And that students need to deeply understand things and their relations to each other. And then to focus on the big ideas.
On the big ideas. And red? Who just took their red one up?
Well, ours, we said the best way to develop fluency was to develop number sense, work with numbers in different ways, not just memorizing, and that memorization makes students suffer in two ways: anxiety, and it makes them not interested and maybe makes them turn away or shy away from their math.
Blue? That next one, fluency?
Well, apparently there was a fellow that he got the math problem wrong in public, so he was ridiculed. And anyway, the focus is the U.S. is kind of steering away from memorizing math facts. It's not really helpful. It brings on anxiety. So it's really about having a strong number sense so you can manipulate and move the numbers around and be able to use them in all different types of problems.
All right. Are you guys ready? All right, perfect.
Okay, we found that students can use facts that they know, if they memorize those facts, to figure out the facts that they don't know. So for example, if you have fact cards, then they can just glance at those cards and sort them in piles of, hey, I know these, oh, I don't know these. And then on those ones they don't know, they can take and write clues using the ones that they do know. So like example 7 plus 5, they would use 5 plus 5 equals 10 and add 2 more. And so that's what we got.
And that's the compensation that they do, and that's having that good sense of number. Were you surprised at your article and what you read and what you found by reading that? Was anyone surprised? I heard they were at this table. Anybody else surprised by what that definition and how that applies to us?
We totally agreed with that about when we were learning math.
Right.
It was just a time test, and, if you knew your facts within a minute, then you were smart in math.
Right.
And if you didn't, then, okay, they need help with math. They don't
Right.
get it.
They don't understand it.
Yeah.
And that's what happens is because there's something called the curse of knowledge. And it's something that we all struggle, especially for us that teach these very young grades, pre-K, K especially. Because when we understand something, it's hard for us not to realize that other people don't understand it as well. And it's hard for us, and especially when you have third grade teachers who go back and try to teach what we teach in kindergarten, they have no idea how to break it down to those minute steps of learning because they're not accustomed to doing those things. But in kindergarten, we do that all the time. In pre-K, we do that all the time. And what we have to do is because if we just continue to expect them to learn something by memorizing it, and they have no concept and they have no frame of reference, it has no meaning to them. I mean, they have nothing to compare that to. They have nothing to latch that onto. So if we just continue to do it over and over and over again, and sometimes, as you know, when we have done 2 plus 2 equals 4 for 2 weeks and they still don't get it, what do? We 2 plus 2. Right? I mean, we just do it, sometimes, it's like, if you're not doing it out loud, you're doing it in your mind anyway, right? Like, what in the world? Why can you not get this? And so what we do sometimes is we just get louder and we beat the drum louder. And what we need to do is we need to step back and we need to teach them the rhythm because they don't understand it. And that's for us, who are musically inclined. You can hear the song. And there's a difference, though, to being able to hear the song and to being able to read the music. And that's the difference. And so we have to teach them that code. And so when we're teaching them that code of mathematics, we have to remember that we have to get away from that curse of knowledge because these things come so naturally to us because as adults, we use math. We understand numbers. It's just like reading. How often now do we have to stop and decode words? Not very often. There might be a word every now and then that we have to stop and decode. But for the most part, we don't have to decode anymore. We don't have to think about numbers as much anymore because automatically we're doing mental math all the time. For these little guys, They don't have that capability. So we have to teach them those things. And so what we're going to be looking at is how can we do that? How can we promote fluency? Well, there's 3 ways in our classrooms that 3 different strategies, 3 different techniques that we need to be doing in our classrooms every day. Now, do you have to do all of them every day? No, but you need to be really relying on these, because regardless of our textbooks, regardless of what we're teaching, if we do not have accountable talk, if we do not have number talks, and if we don't have tasking as part of our math curriculum, then we are not going to produce fluent mathematicians in K1 and 2. So what is accountable talk? Accountable talk is basically just making them accountable for their learning. I heard someone say, tell me why. Explain that to me. We do that a lot in reading, don't we, in language arts? Why? Why did that happen? How do you know? But we don't do that in math so much. So we need to make sure that they understand and that they can verbalize that. And that's the first step. Explain it to me. Number talks are looking at numbers and decomposing that numbers and being able to tell you all the things that they can tell you about a number. In kindergarten, it looks a lot like decomposition, breaking those numbers down and looking at how you can create those numbers. In first and second, it's going to look a lot more like that card up there. Okay, if you don't know 7 plus 5, or if you know that 7 plus 5 is 12, then tell me how you got 12. Did you do 5 and 5 and add 2 more and compensate because you know that 5 and 5 is 10? Do you have a good understanding? Do you understand your doubles facts? How are you getting to that number? Because it is true, fluency is not devoid of memorization. Because as we get more fluent, it comes more naturally to us, doesn't it? Just as reading does. Just that we don't have to stop and sound out words anymore. Well, as we become better mathematicians, as we become more fluent, of course we have memorization. We have that efficiency. But how did we get there? We didn't do time tests over and over and over and over and over again, and then voila, we suddenly understand numbers. Right? And that's how we were taught. What happens? We understand numbers, and because we understand numbers and we understand the relationship between numbers, then we can memorize facts. So we've been doing it in the reverse order, basically. Because instead of practice computation, and we hope this yields understanding, we need to give very implicit, very intentional instruction in order to help students understand math and understand numbers. And then what is the natural result of that? Fluency and computation. Just because they understand the numbers. And that's what I've witnessed this year. I know my little girl's in 2nd grade this year, and when she was in 1st grade, she did not compute quickly. And when they would do those number timed exams and tests, she would have so much anxiety that they would have to move her from her seat to the front row and put a privacy wall around her, because when she saw other students finishing first, she didn't think she was as good as they were. And I had to explain to her, it has nothing to do with time, because research shows that the best mathematicians are usually the ones who finish last. They're not the ones who finish first, because they have, what you all said, an understanding of what they're doing. They're not just recalling facts. Now those students they're probably really good spellers, because they probably have very good visual memory, because they can see those things in their mind. But as we know, what makes us good spellers is visual memory, not necessarily phonemic awareness. So it's the same is true with math. So we have to make sure that we provide that, because students do not have the ability to make those connections when they're K1 and 2. We have to make those connections for them. And so we have to be very intentional and very implicit in order to make that happen. So the accountable talks, number talks, and that's breaking those numbers down, and then tasking. And who's doing tasking in your classroom? People doing tasking in your classroom? That's the first thing that I started. I came to Amanda Atchley's in-service, what she did after school a couple years ago, because she had done training for Teen Corps the first year. So I came to hers, and that's the first thing that I incorporated into my math instruction that really changed thinking in my classroom. And then I started doing a lot of number talks and a lot of accountable talks, and it's pretty much come full circle after doing those things. So if we look at these unifying components of ELA and math, Fluency. Of course, that's our goal. That's what we want to achieve. And in order to achieve fluency, we know what to do in reading. What are the two components of fluency? What makes us fluent readers? There's two components. What do we do to know that a student is fluent? Decoding and comprehension, right? If they can decode and if they can comprehend and they can do those simultaneously and do that efficiently, then we know that they are fluent. We consider them to be fluent readers. In math, it's the flexibility, the number of relationships that they have to know. They have to have that, and this is on your paper, they have to know that relationship between numbers in order to have fluency. That's what we consider to be the flexibility aspect of fluency. Understanding, and that's what some of you talked about, is using what they know in order to determine something or in order to find something they don't know. And the last component is efficiency, and that's being able to use different strategies in order to find the answer. Because as they go along, they learn different strategies, and they put those in their proverbial tool belt, and then when they come to a problem solving, then they have what they need in order to solve that problem. So we have to have all of those. That's fluency. Now, decoding. We know that students have to be able to decode in ELA, right? How do they decode in math? If we're looking at how we decode, we break down the code of mathematics just like we break down the code of language, which in language, of course, it's sounds, letters, words, sentences, paragraphs, and all those things build upon one another to make meaning. So how do we do that in math? What is decoding in math? What does decoding look like in math? Right, number sense. Decomposition, composition, recomposition, number talks. That's the number talk component. When you look at fluency, number talks build that decoding, that ability to decode and break down that code of numbers. You look at comprehension. Comprehension is a key in fluency and in language arts. So what is it in math? What is comprehension? What does it look like? Pardon? Using it and tasking. Because when we give those students that tasking opportunity, they have to understand that problem, don't they, in order to solve it. So tasking is what provides them that opportunity for comprehension. And then the last one is your vocabulary. Because is the vocabulary important in comprehension? Incredibly, right? Doesn't matter if they can decode it. If they don't understand it, and they don't understand what that is, and they have no concept, no frame of reference, who has to make that connection for them? We do, right, as their teachers. And they have to have that vocabulary. Well, how do we develop that vocabulary in math? How do we do that? Right. And we have to be intentional because we've never really been intentional before. And that's through accountable talk. Remember what we said was that first component is getting them to explain it to you, getting them to talk through their thinking, their task of operation, those types of things. That's how we want them to have that vocabulary that they need in order to be good mathematicians. And all components that we've just talked about, accountable talk, high-level tasking, number talks, all of those things require a high utilization of math practices. So if we're doing those things, then we are utilizing those math practices regularly and thoroughly, and that's what we need to do. Because, of course, what we're teaching is important. Our task, our skills, our standards, that's what we teach. But how we teach them are our practices, and so we have to be able to do both. And these will allow you to do those things very well. So when we're looking at vocabulary, and this was something that I thought was also one of those huge takeaways for me, is as we've gotten more into Common Core, and I'm thinking of ELA because we're looking at ELA and math today, what is the one thing that I have pulled away from? What about you? Have you pulled away from something, or you thought, they really have to be able to read with, a better sense of fluency. We have to really focus more on writing. I'm looking more at conventions of writing. I'm looking more at writing as a culminating activity, which it is. So what is one thing that I have not done as much in my classroom?
Sit up there in front of them and do it for them.
I haven't done as much guided reading. Why? Because there's, it's like, where's the time? So all that time when I used to take them and sit them on the carpet in front of me, and we would read the text, and we would do story walks and picture walks, and we would do predictions, and we would do all those things. I haven't taken as much time to do that. And that is what I think, and that's one of those reflections for me as a teacher, and I say, you know what, I'm going to have to do a better job. Because what is the main thing that I can do in kindergarten? Of course, we all know about phonemic awareness and phonological awareness and phonics and all those things, because we're all doing those things. I mean, you can't teach K1 and 2 and not do those things. But if we are not teaching the comprehension aspect as well, are we fully equipping them to be fluent? No. And what I want you to notice is we have to be very intentional when it comes to vocabulary instruction. And that's something that even when I was doing those read alouds and I was doing a lot of guided reading activities, I was not as intentional as I ought. Because it has to be systematic and it has to be explicit. Just as systematic and just as explicit as phonics construction is. Must be. Must be just as systematic and just as explicit as your phonics instruction. Because if not, you're going to have a breakdown. And I want to show you just some examples of what I'm talking about. And the reason that it is so important, and this was another one of those facts that I just could not really wrap my head around. Of course, in our county, we know we have a lot of students that are from low SES, right? That happens. And we wonder when they come to us why there is such a deficit and why they're having trouble answering some of those questions and why they're having trouble understanding that comprehension. And I want you to look at that blank there. Students from low SES have a vocabulary deficit of number words. Does anybody who's not heard this fact before have any idea what their deficit is in vocabulary when they enter kindergarten? What about a number? Can you throw a number out there?
She said 50%.
Like a number. 1,000, 5,000 words.
I'll say 5,000.
5,000 words. Anybody else?
10,000.
10,000 words? How much? 1,500? 30,000. Is that not incredible? 30,000 words. They are deficit in vocabulary.
What would be the norm?
I don't know what the norm is. I don't know how many words, like an average. Yeah, look it up and then share it out with us. Because, and to me, that is incredible. 30,000 words of a deficit just in vocabulary. So if we want them to truly be fluent, we have to do some activities that are very intentional. And I brought this one, and I don't know if you brought any books with you or not, but think about books that you use in your classroom that are fun books. Because sometimes when we think about vocabulary, we think that it has to be informational text. Because where do we learn vocabulary? Where do we learn terms? We learn them in informational text, right? And we think when we do writing, that in order to do informational writing, it has to be about informational text. Well, of course it doesn't. Informational text just means it's something that they show evidence. So if you want them to do writing that's informational, first, where do they first learn evidence? In pictures and illustrations, right? So show them a picture of the napping house and say, now, tell me something about that house. You know, it doesn't have to be something about spiders or bats or whatever. You know, it just has to be something that shows evidence, that's evidentiary. And then next, of course, we look for evidence in our text. And then lastly, we want them to be able to use those higher order comprehension skills of inference and prediction and those types of things. Well, the same is true as we can use these books for vocabulary. We don't have to use them for just reading and just for fun. So if you look at Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type, and we all know this book, right? And the kids love it. It has lots of great stuff in it. It also has great vocabulary. Click, Clack, Moo is great for prosody, because how do students learn the meaning of words is through prosodic language. We emphasize things differently. We say them differently in order to give them an indication of meaning. They also learn, of course, we have to know the definitions of those words. We can do charts that show prefixes and suffixes and things like that when we're talking about doing charts for math words. Then if we chart those things for them and they start to realize the parts of words and things, we can do that as a part of a intentional instruction. Synonym and circle charts, multiple meaning charts, and also Frayer models, and I'm going to show you those. But if you look at Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type, it's so great for prosodic language. And, you know, because you've got your onomatopoeia in there, which they love, you know, Click, Clack, Moo. Cows That Type, impossible. And then the cows were growing impatient with the farmer. They left a new note on the barn door. No eggs, cried Farmer Brown. In the background, he heard them click, clack, moo, clickety, clack, moo. So what do? Because a lot of our students are not going to know what it means to be impatient, especially those who come from that low income background. So you would do some things like this, and I started doing this after 10 core training, And it became a great tool for me because we've talked about it, but did I ever really give them something concrete that they could refer back to? So it becomes more like an anchor chart. So we talk about it. And so I just write the word impatient. And what does that mean, friends? What does it mean to be impatient? Well, they gave me the definition. You cannot wait for something to happen. So that's what it means to be impatient. So then I write that for them and I chart it for them. And then you always do a picture that gives them some type of a visual clue. So my picture, we talked about vacation, and that would be something that we would be very impatient about. So we drew the calendar and we circled the beach, and circled that date. And then you also give them something that is emotion or some type of kinesthetic. So when you do that, and I let them come up with that as well. Well, how would we act out that? How would we show what it looks like to be impatient? And they would do this, and they tap their fingers on the table because that's what it means to be impatient. So anytime we say, all right, what is impatient? And they can tell me this definition verbatim because they created it, and of course they're invested in it. And then when they have this, that gives those students that need a little bit more of a reminder. It gives them something. A demand. A demand is to ask for something immediately, and that was their definition. And so and sometimes you have to build that connection for them because they may not know. They may not know what a demand is or when a context for that word. So I told them about my grandpa's house, and we paid someone to fix it, and they never showed up after we gave them the money. So I demanded that they give me my money back. So that would be a time when a demand would be appropriate. So here's my house with a broken roof, and then here's my money, that I paid and I got no work for. So that gives them something to relate back to. And then demand, and of course when we say demand, they, hit their fist on the table. So there's all, we can do this with all these books that we're doing. Can we also do these with math terms? Sure. Of course we can. Because if we can do intentional instruction with vocabulary in language arts, we can also do it with vocabulary in math. You can also do something like and then here's neutral, because neutral, what kid knows what neutral means, right? So neutral means you do not pick sides, you're in the middle. And so we drew a picture of the ducks. And so, or the chickens rather, looks like more like a duck to me. But here's the duck, he's in the middle because he's not going to take the side of the farmer or the hens.
So what do you do if they pick a definition that means that, but like neutral? I would have some of my kids, my enrichment kids, well, neutral, because they call that nude color in the crown box neutral.
Right.
Somebody's taught them that.
Right.
But not teach them that.
Right.
And so, well, my skin's neutral.
Right.
So
then you can do multiple meaning.
Towards the one you want.
Yes, and you can say, well, that word has multiple meanings. That's one of those multiple meaning words. So this is what we're talking about in regard to the story. It means that you don't pick sides. And of course, they came up with this as their visual. You don't pick sides, you're in the middle. And so if they said that, well, what about that color? Well, then you would do something like with a multiple meaning. Because strike, the cows went on strike. So, and strike is to stop working until you get what you want. And we did the picket sign, and then when they say strike, they hold up their picket sign. Well, strike also means something else. Strike can also mean to hit something. So some words mean more than one thing. And so that's another way that you can build that vocabulary, especially for enrichment and those that are higher. Then you have a multiple meaning page, which goes with your definition, and it shows that strike can mean both of those things. It means no eggs, but it also means to hit something. And then you can do something like a synonym chart, where you would do the farmer was furious, so then we come up with other words that also mean furious. And so I just give them the chance, and they came up with mad, angry, upset, and enraged, because enraged was one of our other words that we had had in another story before, so they remembered it. So they made that connection. Then, of course, there's ultimatum, to demand with consequences. A demand with consequences by someone who's in charge. So, of course, who's going to know what an ultimatum is? And did you ever think about Click, Clack, Moo as being a book that really was very rich in vocabulary? Probably not, because it's just one that we read for fun. But there's lots of those books that we read for fun that have very rich vocabulary that we can use for intentional instruction. And then OW, that was, of course, what we used for phonics, because of cow. So that was something that we used in order to teach that skill as well. So there's so many things that we can do, and these types of things that we're doing with ELA, we can do these with math. You know, when we're looking at equations and we're looking at what those symbols mean, and we're looking at why do we use parentheses and why do we do things, you know, then we let them create those definitions and create those examples. If you're doing a Frayer model, and this is something that was new to me, have you guys heard of a Frayer model before? I hadn't either, and it was something that was brand new. And then here's one, of course, that is a true nonfiction book, but it's done more as a narrative. And what do you do with a tale like this? And so this one's really good, too, for vocabulary. If you want to go more of your non-traditional route insofar as your nonfiction. Pardon? I don't know. Is it?
I think that, what do you do with the tell?
And it's just really great with lots of true, what you would consider your informational text type vocabulary. And what I have found in teaching, like with nonfiction or informational text, that if I use books like this, instead of just what you consider your traditional informational text style books, that they are more inclined to create and put things in their own words. Because if you give them those text readers that are informational text and that are very simplistic, what do they want to do? They just want to repeat exactly what the book has said. But if you give them books like this, to where it's more written in a narrative form, then they have to create those facts themselves. And it helps them when they get to their writing in order to put what they want to say in their own words instead of in the words of someone else. So that's something that I've really incorporated a lot into my instruction this year when it comes to informational things, is using more of an informational narrative rather than your traditional informational text. Okay, let's move on. Where are we? Oh, Frayer model. Let me show you my Frayer model. Frayer model looks like this. And all you do is fold your chart paper twice, and then you take that inside corner and you fold it down. And then when you open it up, it looks like this. And it's just another type of graphic organizer. And, of course, these got bent up a little. But your vocabulary word goes in the middle, and then you put your definition here. So it's similar to what we've done. So you put your definition here, and then you let them do an example or a picture of what that word means. Then down here on the bottom, you use a non-example. So that's another way, if you have those students that might come up with an incorrect answer, this is what it is not. Because that's just important to know what it is, but it's also important to know what it's not. And then here you would use a synonym or a sentence, using that word in that sentence or finding another word that means something similar. So it's taking all of these and combining them into one. So that's what a Frayer model looks like. And I thought of probably like laminating, because you want to leave those up. So if you're doing a story and you're doing click, clack, moo, and you had 5 vocabulary words, I would want to leave those up for my entire study. So I might laminate 5 or 6 of these, use them for a study, and then clean them off, and then use them for the next literature study. That way you're not creating so many, but you can use the same ones over and over again and still show them and have them displayed during that time. Do you think that's pretty neat? Yes. You just take your chart paper, fold it, hamburger, then you fold it, hot dog, and then I folded it one more time just because I had to fit it in my bag. But then you just fold that corner. And so when you do that, then it creates that center section. Now, if you look next at the listening comprehension equals reading comprehension, when they are listening and they have that good, strong sense of listening comprehension, then that will transfer, that will emanate into their command of reading comprehension. Because if we can do that with listening activities, especially in kindergarten, they have strong listening comprehension skills, and that's going to, of course, impact their reading comprehension. And their oral defense, what they're able to tell you and defend orally, is going to transfer into what they can do in written form. And are we expecting them to do more and more of that? Definitely. Because what's happening in 3rd grade, what's happening with 10 Ready, it's all going to be response. And so they have to have those strong skills. So we have to provide that. And how we do that in kindergarten is through a lot of listening, because we have to build that vocabulary. And of course, that can only be expanded in 1st and 2nd. So if we're doing that in kindergarten, you guys can really run with it in 1 and 2. Authentic writing serves as a culminating assessment for ELA. Is that true? Yes. Because if they can write, friends, I mean, they've got it all. And when it's evaluated both as convention and content, because you've got students that are stronger, some in convention, and their writing looks beautiful, but they may not have that content just yet. You've got some that maybe their convention's not quite there, but if you ask them, they can, beautiful storytelling. So we have to look at in both. We have to look at it on both of those levels. Mathematics also requires that. It requires a global understanding and a working knowledge. So they have to have both as well, of separate yet connected pieces of the puzzle. And traditionally, what's happened? When we look at math, do we look at it as a connected discipline? No, it's very disconnected, isn't it, traditionally? First we teach number sense, then we teach shapes, then we teach adding, then we teach numbers 5 to 10, and then we teach subtraction. I mean, there's not a cohesive nature to math in the way that we've taught it and the way that we've understood it traditionally. But it is. It's just as connected as reading is. And that's that light bulb for me. Reading and math both have that zero multiplication factor. And what does that mean? If children can comprehend but they can't decode, are they fluent? No. If students can compute but they can't comprehend, are they fluent? No, and vice versa. They have to have both, because any one, if you have the comprehension times 0, right? Any number times 0 is 0. So if you don't have it, then it's going to negate that other strength. So we've got to make sure they have both. Right Start is an assessment that I included in your packet if you want to look at it. Debbie Rowe, who's with Peabody College at Vanderbilt, she created this, and we use this in kindergarten. This is a way for you to look at where your students are in writing, in both content and in convention. So it gives you that standard, that rubric that you can compare it to. It's back there in your packet. You can look at that if you would like.
She has one too that they gave us this summer. That's for the parents. It's
Yes.
like that, but it doesn't have, and so I gave that out at orientation,
Uh-huh.
and it really helped my parents
Understand.
what their kids' writing is supposed to look like and what you want it to look like by May. But she has one for parents.
Because a lot of times parents don't understand, what
They'll
we
say,
see.
You just scribbled all day.
Exactly. And that's not how you spell that word. And so they don't understand the process. So, and we've all seen that, right? So what we've done at Scribble Primary is I was over the writing PLC this year. I chaired that this year. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to look at horizontal and vertically, both, to see where our students should be by the end or beginning of the next grade level. And we worked on that to have a rubric so we would be on the same page, so to speak, because we have 14 kindergartens and 14 first grades and 15 second grades, I think. So, I mean, we're pretty big, as far as, how many students we have or how many teachers we have per grade level. So there's a lot of inconsistency there. So we wanted to look and see where we wanted them to be. And that's something that we've done, and it's something that you may want to do as well at your school, and this might be something that you might even want to take time, and I don't know on how much time you're going to have at your PLC, but on June 2nd, but it might be something that you want to do when you start the year next year, is to get together across those grade levels and decide where are we going? What is our goal? What would we like to see? And what we came up with is at the end of first grade, there was much more disconnect than in any other of those grade levels. So at kindergarten, what we said we would like to see at the end of kindergarten is 3 sentences that are on topic. Now, they don't have to be huge, but if they could do 3 sentences that are on topic, that would be fabulous. And then where we finally decided at first grade is that first grade, if they could have a paragraph, which would be 5 sentences, all on topic, your topic sentence, your closing, your summary sentence, and then 3 supporting details in the middle. And if they could have that by the end of first grade, then by the end of second grade could really expound on that, do several paragraphs, even do some story writing. So that was what we decided worked for us. So keep that in mind, and of course that is not the way that it needs to be at your school. You may be, you may have totally different ideas, but that's where we were going. And I have something to show you guys. that one of my students did in kindergarten, and this is one of those examples that if everyone could write like this in kindergarten, I would be so excited. And this is one of my little girls, and of course this is a lot of instruction, and we have to be very intentional when it comes to this as well. And we all know how much we talk, right, in our classrooms from the time we get there until the time we end, and that's how they learn, because they learn by listening to us, and by us modeling for them, and by us repeating ourselves and very benevolently, showing them these things, over and over and over again. But this is one of my little girls, and she does qualify in that low SES. She is not from, one of those homes that had a lot of advantages, single parent, low income, that is not even in the country. So lots of disadvantages. Not a strong relationship with mom. Has told me several times she doesn't think her mom loves her. So she doesn't even have emotional support at home. And we do have a lot of students who don't have maybe that financial support, but they have a loving home. So you look at where she is, and then I want you to look at her writing. And this was with just, intentional instruction. I'm sorry. But it's what we see, right? And we were using the word hour because hour was the popcorn word that we were working on. And I wanted them to use hour in a sentence. And their instructions are, if you use it and you only want to write one sentence, because some of them are only capable of writing one sentence, then that word needs to be in your sentence. If you want to write more than one sentence, then that's fine. But make sure that they are all on topic. And so you can see her level of phonemic awareness. Look at her convention. The complexity of her sentences, the connectedness of her sentences. To me, that's fabulous. This would be like top rubric right here. And this is from a student that does not have those advantages that a lot of our students have. So I just wanted you to see that. She did that, of course, on 5/15. So, I just went down and made these copies not too long ago. But that to me was one of those, times, and my little heart just was full when I saw that. Getting back to where we were, the average income, and we've started this dialogue. We're on the top of this next page. Started this dialogue in my classroom with my students this year, and through 10 Core, this is one of those things that I have become very passionate about, because we do have students like her who don't have those advantages. And if we don't make that part of their dialogue, they don't see college as something that's even in their future. They have no idea. They don't even think that it's that it's open to them, that that's even a choice. And I know with my little girl, we drove across the state of North Carolina to go to spring break, and every college we passed, we discussed it. Oh, you could go there. That would be great. Would you like to go? University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. They have really good academics. We talk about it all the time, but not all of those students have that advantage, and so we have to make that part of their, we have to make that part of their dialogue, because what I want you to realize is the average income in Tennessee for a person with no secondary education. No. Not an associate, technical school, any of those kinds of things. Do you have any idea what that average income is? $9,000. $9,000. Is that not incredible? And even part of my award ceremony, I took the time with all those parents in my room, and I told them that. I said, this is so critical. And now that Tennessee is offering a free education in grades 13 and 14, the first state in the union to do so, they actually have that opportunity. And we have to give them support, because, of course, the students who may not see this as an option are the ones who are going to need the greatest support to get there. So we're going to have to provide that for them. But we prepare students by exposing them to all these different activities. And every time we do something that really makes their mind grow a lot, I'll say, friends, why are we doing this? And they say, to get to college. Because they know, that this is why we're doing it. And that's their response, is to get to college. Because I want them all to get there. Can you imagine how important college is going to be by the time they get there? I've been out since 91, and I look at the percentage and what college afforded me. Now look at a bachelor's degree and what it's going to afford them. Not nearly the advantages that it afforded us. And especially with so many careers coming up in STEM, with science, technology, engineering, and math. If they don't have that, we're going to continue to see a lot of the things that we see. in our county with our kids. So we prepare them by exposing them to informational writing opportunities and all these math things that we've talked about. Informational writing, and I'm right there in the middle, is a response to literature and storytelling, awareness of informational text structures, text evidence, and all those things that we've just talked about, and how we can do that. And there's some information in here if you want to flip back to that. Not as much of intentional instruction that I really want us to focus that much on, but it's just morning message and the things that we want to show them in a morning message and what's important in morning message. If you want to expose them to text, and if they're very, they don't have a lot of background, then these are some things that we can do in order to get them ready for that. And what you want to do is you want to just make sure that their names are included and some of those things, because a lot of times that really gets them engaged. And I've never really done that habitually in my morning message, and it's something else I've gotten away from, but it gives them that opportunity to do a student response, and so to have ownership, and it also gives them that opportunity just to feel validated, because so many students don't see themselves as learners. They don't see themselves as important. And this is an opportunity for that to happen. And what we want, of course, what we want them to do is we want them to see themselves as readers and writers, because if they don't, it doesn't have the same impact on their lives. And I know there's an example that I've shared that, and I've watched golf my whole life because my dad's a golfer. I've never played around in my life, but I do like to ride on the golf carts, and do some things like that. And I like to watch because I always liked Payne Stewart, growing up, and he always wore really cool, clothes and socks and knickers and stuff. But I never really watched it that closely until Grady, my little girl, started playing. And now that she plays, when I watch it totally differently, because I have an investment. And I'm not a golfer, but my child's a golfer. So I watch it so differently now than I ever did. And what's the difference? Just because I have a personal connection. So if they have a personal connection to reading and writing and to math, and they see themselves as readers and writers and mathematicians, they're going to be so much more successful because they have ownership and because they have an investment. So, next one, there's a blank there. What percentage of the text that we read as adults are informational? You guys have any idea? How much informational, what percentage of reading that we do that's informational? How much? 25%. 25%. Anybody else? 86%. 86% of what we read is informational. So when they're doing those standardized tests, we want them to have an exposure to standardized to that informational writing, because what they see on standardized assessments, 50 to 85% are informational, which really corresponds to what we're doing as adults. And what about math? Mental math. How much of the math that we do as adults do you think is mental? So you're saying like around 85, 86%? Anybody else? 50%. Just 50% of what we do as adults is mental math. Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. Now, we're very efficient with the mental math we do, but we only use mental math about 50% of the time. So I think that's very interesting.
Because we have calculators and cash registers.
And cell phones, and yes, and all those things, because I don't do mental math nearly as much as I could.
I can't count the change in the concession stand unless I have a calculator. Because I'm used to retail and you use a...
Right. And that's something else, an interesting point, is when we think about math and we think about reading as adults, I mean, how many times do you hear people say, I'm just not good at math?
A lot.
A lot of people say that, right? And they have no problem saying it whatsoever, right? But how many people do you hear say, I'm just not a very good reader? Never, right? Because people don't want to admit that. But we have no problem admitting that we are crummy mathematicians. And really, they're just as important. One's just as important to the other. And we see how that I think that's a result of the impact and the influence that we as teachers, and too, just the how much importance we placed on that, in schools, because we don't. We don't think that it's just as important as something else. And I was doing Teen Corps training when Maya Angelou passed away, and someone brought up one of her quotes, and one of her quotes was, if you can't read, they'll beat you, and if you can't add, they'll cheat you. And that's exactly right. I mean, they're both just as important life skills as one's just as important as the other, but for some reason we don't view it that way. And we have to make sure that our kids see that math is just as important as reading. If we look at how are we going to build this number sense, all right, so that's where we want to go. How are we going to build it? What are we going to do? We know a lot about language arts, right? I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for you to see some of those activities for language arts, those intentional vocabulary, because of that statistic and this new information that I've learned. Something else that I did this year that has worked really well for me is this. And this is a decoding activity that we do. So when your students start writing, and they're past that point where they're actually culminating and putting all these things together, and I've taught them to use the lines, to think about first, of course, your first step is to think about what you want to say, how many words is it going to take you to say it, and then they draw their lines on the page, and then they start each word, and a lot of them have to decode still. So they get caught up, though, in decoding, and they will write it, and then they'll erase it, and they think, oh, that's not right, and so and then their paper doesn't look nice, and then they're frustrated, and, all those things. So what I've done is I took these, and this was an idea that was passed out to us, but you take an old DVD case, and then you do your boxes, and then inside they have a marker, like with your little eraser on the end. So when they're doing their writing and they come to a word that they have to sound out, then all they have to do is write it on the outside of here. So they would do, if they're trying to spell the word coat, K-O-T. So now they have it, and so then they transfer it onto their paper, and then for the next word, all they have to do is erase it, and now they can start over again, and they have something right at their table so that they have something kind of like their own little write-on-wipe-off board that's not actually a write-on-wipe-off board that they can use, and then they can just stick it in their desk. And it all is self-contained, in their own little case. So they've loved using these things this year, and it's really been helpful. So you can do, and then you have 4 on the other side. So if you have a larger word, with more parts, then they can use the other side. But let's look, I think that's all for language arts. Let's look at math, because the first thing we want to do is we have to, if we are wanting them how to build number sense, it's you have to look at both what is subject matter appropriate and what is important to them as to your knowledge of your students, the pedagogical aspect. So what is your subject matter, and how can you teach that to them most effectively? So if we do, we have to know that our course of knowledge. And what is so interesting about math, about teaching mathematics, and this is something that I felt was so surprising, and you will too, Sarah, is because you said, I wasn't a very good mathematician, so I didn't feel good about teaching math. Research shows that is very irrelevant when it comes to being a good math teacher. What your working knowledge of math is very insignificant when it comes to how well you can teach math. We don't have to be good mathematicians to be good math teachers. So to me, that was very very encouraging. So when we look at that, we want to look at this trajectory, because this is where we are when they first come to us, and they may not have that good sense of number. When you ask us, when you've gone over several times, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you say, now show me 5, and they still have no idea what 5 looks like, and you're thinking, why don't they know what 5 looks like? We've done this. How can you not know what 5 looks like? That's when you don't tap louder. That's when you have to step back and you have to teach the song. Because what we do is we look, and this is something that really was very important to me in my instruction and in my teaching, is that the first thing they have to be able to do, is they have to be able to count words up to a given number. That's just rote counting. And you have students who can't rote count when they start kindergarten. So we have to teach this first. And then we go to counting one item for each number, so just your one-to-one correspondence, right? And if you're having a student that's having trouble with this, you can go back into this trajectory and you can pinpoint exactly where their disconnect is. And I've never had the tools to do that before, because I didn't know. It was all just lumped under number concept. 3, can they keep track of an unorganized pile? So if you give them a set of something, can they sort it into a way to where they can make sense of it? And 4, they know how many after counting. So when you have a student that counts 4 in this pile, and you say, now tell me how many there are altogether, and they can't remember that was 4, and they have to go back and recount it all over again, then that's along this trajectory. So we have to make sure that we teach that intentionally. Then number 5, they can count out a particular quantity. This is usually where we start. 5, can you show me 5? 6, they know that each successive counting word refers to a quantity that is one larger. So you know that if you have 6, what is one more? 7. Well, can you show me what that looks like? Because a lot of them might know that 7 comes after 6, but did they realize what the differential is between the two numbers? And then you have perceptual subitizing and number relationships, and these are the ones that come after. So when we get to this, we come to perceptual subitizing. And we all have the ability to conceptually subitize, and subitize was a word I had not had a lot of familiarity with before this training. And have you guys heard the word subitize? Yes, some of you. I had not until just a couple of years ago, but subitizing means that we can look at something and our brain can make sense of how many there are, basically. That's what it means. So, and we all have the ability to subitize up to the number 4. So even as adults, we can't conceptually subitize or perceptually subitize higher than the number 4. All right? So we cannot do that. If we look at that number, if we look at these on this paper, even as adults, having, the ability to count and to do advanced math, we can still only see numbers in groups of 4 or smaller. That's all our brain allows us to do. So what we have to do then is we have to use that, and we have to give them practice being able to just do that conceptual subitizing, because some of them have never had practice with that before. And if you do that and you trick your mind and you do it, you'll see what your brain is doing. If you slow down enough and think about it, you'll say, oh, I'm seeing 4 and 3. You can't see 7 altogether. You can see 4 and 3. You can see, you can see 2, 2 and 3. You can see different numbers like that, but you cannot see 7. We can only see 4. So we have to teach them to do that first, and then when we get past that, then we can teach them to do some conceptual subitizing. And what that means is then what we're doing is we're teaching them to look at larger numbers bigger than 4 and to group them into those smaller numbers. Does that make sense? So what we're doing when we're moving down this trajectory is we're doing the trajectory for beginning learners can be used to identify a gap. That's what you see up there. And then we're looking at number relationships. After we look at perceptual subitizing, which is learning to take those numbers and to break them down. After you have that good conceptual subitizing skill, are you guys with me? Okay, because those get a little blurred, I think, sometimes. Conceptual subitizing is up to 4. Perceptual subitizing is be able to take it and look at how you can break it down into numbers smaller than 4. Then we look at number relationships and how those numbers can compare to one another. All right? So that's our trajectory. So that's where you want to look first. Then after you do that, you want to look for matching numerals to sets, like 1 through 5, and 6 to 10. So that's when you would start some of those activities like, can you show me, you show them the number 5, can you show me 5? And that would be things like, just using a plate. You don't have to do anything very extravagant at all. I gave these my kids, and I said, okay, work with your partner, show your partner the number card, and then have your partner put that number on the plate, and then you double check it. Just to make sure that they understand what those numbers look like. And we did that, and they loved it. I mean, can you imagine that kindergartners love doing something that mundane? But they do. They think that's the greatest thing ever. So, we did things like that first. You can use 10 frames for that, right? And 10 frames are a really good way to build that perceptual subitizing, because in the beginning, a lot of students only see 5 in this straight row because this is how we teach them with 10 frames in the beginning, right? They only see 6 like this because this is how we teach them with a 10 frame. And then once they have something concrete, then you can change that up and you can change your arrays. And those that are lower functioning, you might want to use predictable arrays. Those that are higher functioning, you want to use something that's a non-predictable array, because they know what it looks like on a die. They know what it looks like on a 10 frame. But for those that are higher, you wouldn't want to give them something that looks more like this and see what they're going to do with it. So after, and then I'm just going through because my goal this year was to see how I could take my instruction and I could come up with 65% of my instruction being counting and cardinality. And this was the way that I did it. Now, there's lots of ways to do it, but this is what I did. And then after we did that with 10 frames, and you can also, of course, use your Reckon Recs. You guys use Reckon Recs? That was something new for me, too. You can make your own with something like this if you want to use the beads and just a piece of board. And this is just a way for counting and to group. It's just a new term for an abacus, basically. It's the Dutch term for an abacus. But anyway, it's just a way for them to practice counting. And what I did, I found this another idea on Pinterest, and I liked it a little bit better because it just seems to be a little more durable. They've been using this one. But you just use these plastic baskets, and then you tie the ribbon from side to side and put your beads on them. And then you could use 10, 20, 30, 40, and you can make it larger depending upon what your skill levels are. If you just want to do one that's to 20, then you could just use a basket like this. And to me, that's a lot easier because I don't have to laminate, I don't have to cut, I don't have to tape, staple. It's not nearly as many steps. All I'm doing is tying ribbon and putting some beads on there. So to me, that was easier. So these are the ones that I've been using in my classroom. There's also really great ideas and really great literature that you can use. Have you used Clack and Count? This is great for subitizing, like when they're doing beginning subitizing. 7 ducklings, 1 + 6 in the water playing tricks. So you're looking at how to take the number 7 and different ways that you can make the number 7. So they might use their 10 frame to show 1 and 6. And then you can say, well, how else can we show that? How's another way that we can show the number 7? They can do that on their Rec and Rec, show 1 and 6. Lots of different ways that they can do that to show that perceptual subitizing in different ways in order to break that number down. And that perceptual subitizing, of course, leads to your decomposition of numbers. So, and what's so great about it is when they start to decompose numbers and they start to subitize, what do you think is going to happen when you start addition? It's going to be easy, isn't it? I didn't even formally have to teach addition this year because they already knew, because they had so much background in subitizing and in decomposition, recomposition of numbers. So it made it so much easier to do those kinds of things. Once you once you have that ability to look at those numbers and to match numbers to sets using 10 frames, Rec and Recs, and all those kinds of things. And of course, you can also use these for your phonemic awareness. Do you guys do those with your 10 frames when you're sounding out words? If that's something that you want to do, you can use these just for them to be able to sound out words, but at, when they actually have to move things. So we use these all the time for ELA and for math, which is another good way to make a connection between the two when you're using the same tools, because then they see that they're very related. And one of my students, when we did addition and then we started using subtraction, and a little guy in my room, Cole, he said, well, Miss Christie, subtraction and addition are antonyms. And I was like, yeah, you're right, they are. Because he started to see the connection between those two functions and relating it to an ELA skill, which I thought, that's fabulous. I'm really doing what I set out to do. I want them to be able to see the relationship between the two. So after you can do those things and they can match those numbers to those sets, remember we started with trajectory and all those activities, then we moved to matching numbers to sets, and now you want them to compare numbers, which is your number relationships. And we use these grader gators, and they loved these too. These are those chip clips that you get at the Dollar Tree they're 3 for $1. And I just put these out in a center, and they got with their little partner, and they would have like a war game, where they would each have a set of cards, and they would each turn a card over, and whoever had the bigger card, the bigger number, the gator would eat it. And they would just clip it on there, which they thought, of course, once again, something very simplistic, they thought it was the best thing ever. This is a great way to build that future learning for making that connection with your greater and less than signs, because how do we do that? We talk about greater gator when they get in 1st and 2nd grade. So that's a really great way, and these were just, like I said, so cheap. And they've been really durable because we've used them all year, and not one's broken, amazingly. So that's another thing. And one of my friends who taught 1st grade, and she's a core coach, she made these for her higher level students to do the same type of activity, but it's just an index card with 2 brads and 2 lines. And so they would pick 2 numbers and then do the same type of game. But if the numbers were equal, of course this would be equal, and then if one was greater than, then they would just move it. Isn't that cool? Because then you can show what's greater than and what's less than. And the alligator, once again, is still eating the bigger number, so you're just building on past learning of what's already been taught. So I thought that was a great thing. So the next thing you want to do is compare numbers, and then you want to look at your subitizing of your arrays, because that's really what's going to come next. We kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but that's where you're going to start next. And doesn't that make sense? Once they learn to compare numbers, now they're going to be able to look at how those numbers can be broken apart. And so you're going to do your subitizing of arrays, looking for your missing parts, those types of things. Then you're going to do what we started. We started this back in October, and we started doing actually decomposition of numbers. And that's my kindergarten number talk. That's what I do, is I do all decomposition of numbers when I'm doing a number talk in kindergarten. And what we would do is we would start with just a specified parameter. So I might say, all right, and we did it with Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. I always try to use some kind of literature when I introduce a new skill. And so we did Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, so they know it is Chicka Chicka Boom Boom math. And so when we started back in October, we started with the number 3. And we worked from 3 up to 10, because you never want to decompose over 10. 10 is your largest number that you really want to decompose, because what is our number system is base 10. So we want to learn all those codes of number up to the number 10. And then when we get past 10, of course, then we're looking at base 10, and we're looking at larger numbers and how all that works together. But so we did Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, and they decomposed numbers with a specified parameter. So what we would do is I would give them, and you have one of these on your table, I would give them a bag like this, and I would say, all right, today we're going to work on the number 4. All right, friends? So you have your cubes in your bag, and I want you to work, and let's see if we can see how many different ways we can make 4. So if we're going to make the number 4, how many am I going to take out of my bag? 4, right? Because what is my whole? My whole is 4. I'm going to look and see, just by picking these out, how many ways I can make 4. So the rule is you can only pick 4, and you can't look at them, all right? So let's pick 4 out of my bag. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, I have 4. What do you notice about the 4 that I have? They're all the same color. So we worked together on filling out charts that were very similar to these for each number. And so we would look at all the different ways to make 4. And we would record those. So of course this is the number 7. So one of the first ways we made 7 was 4 and 3. And then I would use the little colors, and we would do this together as a guided lesson. And so one of the ways that we can make 7 is 4 and 3. And so they would record that. And then we know that we have 6 ways to make the number 5. How many ways do you think that we can make the number 6? 7. If there's 7 ways to make the number 6, how many ways do you think there are to make the number 7? 8. So they start to see, that there's a pattern to all these things. So in the beginning, I only gave them the option of doing 2 add-ins. We're just looking at how we can do that with 2 add-ins, 4 and 3. And then we would fill up the entire chart, just like this one. And so I told them, and I wanted them to, to see that you need to be organized when you're doing this, friends, because anytime you're doing learning, you have to be organized with your record keeping. So this is your record sheet, and I want you to decide what color you're going to use first, and that's always going to be in that first column. This is always going to be your second column. So 6 is 3 and 3, or 4 and 2, or 2 and 4, right? Because does it really matter which one comes first? No. So of course you're teaching the commutative property just by doing, this activity. 6 and 0, 1 and 5, 0 and 6, and 5 and 1. Those are all the ways that we can make 6 using 2 add-ins. And then we would take that and we would move, and if you look at your paper, after we did Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, then we would look at how we would make sure that these were balanced. All right, so we need to check this, because what do good mathematicians do? They always double check. We always double check, because we want to make sure that our hypothesis is correct. And so if we think that 3 and 3 is 6, then let's make sure that that equation is balanced. And that's what we always say in my classroom, is we want to make sure that equation is balanced, because we're not looking for an answer. Okay, we're looking to make sure that our equation is balanced. So we would use our monkey, and you have little Mr. Monkey Math Man? They love this thing. So you would take Mr. Monkey, and if our hypothesis is that 3 and 3 is 6, then we need to double check that. And if we do, and we have that as part of our equation, then we can put it on there, and we can make sure that it actually balances. And I hope I have 2 3s. If not, we may have to move to another one. All right, let's do 2 and 4, because unfortunately with Monkey Math, they don't give you lots of the same number. So 2 and 4, and we know our whole is 6, right? So let's put 6 there, and let's make sure that our equation balances. If we have 6, and you're telling me right? That you think that 2 and 4 will balance that equation. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So let me find my 4. So here's my 4. And here's my 2. And of course, if the equation balances, then he balances as well. So that gives them a great visual as what does it mean for an equation to be balanced. And so that is they have loved this dude. And anytime we come back to equations, they always reference Mr. Monkey Man because they just think he's great. I ordered him on, you can get him on Amazon, you can get him in, yeah, he's not expensive. Yeah, not expensive at all. And so when we did monkey math, then guess what we did next? We went from just looking at how we can make this number and how we can decompose it to actually looking at an equation, is it balanced, and what does an equation look like? So this led us naturally and very gently and very easily into writing equations. So then we would take and we would do number bonds at the same time because they need to know those number bonds also. So here is 3 and 3. And it's 6. And that's real easy to make that connection because if you look at the chart that I made, if I can find it, it looks a lot like a number bond. 3 and 3 is 6. So here's 3 part, whole, 6. How do we write that as an equation? 3 plus 3 equals 6. So that's how we started with addition. Did I have to teach addition? Not really. But they were so good at it by the time we got to this point that I really didn't need to teach it. And then we would do decomposition with expanded notation. And I started that with the number 6. And all we did up until we got to the number 5 was those 2 parameters, looking and doing these kinds of activities. Because really, up until they had several experiences with that, were they really ready to move on and did they have that level of understanding? So what we started then is when we got to 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, we started saying, okay, let's look at how we can break these numbers down into more than 2 add-ins. So let's break them down into more than 2. And so this was one of our number talks that we did with the number 6. And this is from a long time ago. I wish I had dated it. But these don't take very long. This is like 10 minutes. And so we started looking at how we can make 6. And so they would use, what I would do is I would just give them 6 Unifix cubes. And we call them our 10 towers now because we work with 10 all the time. But I would give them 6 Unifix cubes, and then they would just look for different ways that they can make 6. And we'd say, okay, you can do it in 3 add-ins, you can do it in 4 add-ins, you can do 5 add-ins, however many you want to do. And this is some of the things that they came up with. 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 equals 6. Well, let's test that hypothesis. Let's make sure it's right. So we would do that because that's what good mathematicians do. And then we started saying, well, let's look at different patterns within that. Do you see any patterns of numbers within that equation? Oh, you see 2 2s, okay, and you see 2 1s. So then we started talking about, well, what does that look like? Well, in 6, you have 2 sets of 2, and we never use the word times. We never use the word multiplication. We just say we have 2 sets of 2. Do you see those 2 sets of 2? Yes. And then you also have 2 sets of 1. Well, how do we write that? How do good mathematicians write that? We use parentheses. And why do we use parentheses? Because that's what good mathematicians know to do first. So that's what we're doing now in our classroom. And so they're writing all of these in expanded notation. And they're using those things, and they're using those patterns within that number of expanded notation to write them as sets of. So when they get to 2nd grade, they don't have to think, oh no, now I'm having to learn something totally different. What is multiplication? I tell you, friends, I was in college doing teacher training before I realized that multiplication was related to addition. Okay? And I was an honor student all through school. Went to school full scholarship and had no idea that addition and multiplication were related functions because nobody made that connection for me because it was all disconnected. And so that I want them to see that. I want them to know that when they get there that this multiplication business isn't anything new. It's just a different way to look at how numbers are made and how we can decompose those and how we can recompose them differently. So this is what we started doing. And then after we finished that, we started base 10. So we threw in some base 10 stuff because do they have to know base 10? Definitely. And all the 1st grade teachers that I've talked to have said base 10 is where the disconnect happens. You know, they might be great at other things, but they do not have a good understanding of base 10. And so we started doing a lot of things with base 10. And the thing about math, and this was in my article that I didn't share with you guys, but what we see as far as their abilities in math in early grades is a greater predictor of their academic success than ELA is. Isn't that incredible? Because if they're stronger in math and they have those good mathematical abilities, that is a greater indicator of their future success academically than language arts is. And the reason is because math builds executive functions that ELA doesn't. Because math is problem solving, math is looking for patterns, math is doing all those things that we use in ELA, but where do we build it? We build it in math. So it's so important. And then what happens is because we've taught math so disconnectedly for so long, is that they don't realize they don't have those connections, just like I, at 21, didn't have those connections. They don't have them either. And so kids that are young like math, but by the time they get to 4th and 5th grade, their opinions totally change about math. They don't like it anymore. And you can imagine if we make it disconnected in K1 and 2, imagine what's happening in 6, 7, and 8. Because they're not seeing any type of cohesiveness whatsoever. They're not seeing any type of applicability. So we have to make those connections for them very intentionally. So what we do then is we do base 10, because what do kids know about base 10? Do they understand base 10? Not really. Not really. So this is when we start talking about bigger numbers. We've worked with 10, and we were doing this, friends, we're still doing it, okay? So we're doing this every day still. This was 8. This was what we were doing with 8. And then this is what we did with the number 10. So these were some of our number talks for the number 10. And you can see, a lot of the stuff that they're doing is quite elaborate. And this is just their own work. This is me leading a conversation, and with the math talk, you just have them explain their thinking, tell you how they got the number, and you just record whatever it is they've told you. So if you look, you see 2 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 10. And then what else can we do with that, Belle? Well, we can take those 2 sets of 3, and that means there's 3 sets of 2 plus 1 plus 3 equals 10. She's right. So, those are all those things that we're doing up to 10. And I'm going to show you something else that one of my friends did. But we start with those, and then once we get to that point, they're ready to look at bigger numbers because they understand how all those numbers are working together. So then we look at the base 10, and what I have learned and what is very important, especially for younger grades, is what is a 1 to a 5-year-old? It's 1, right? And so if we talk about 10s and 1s, they don't get it because a 1 cannot be a 6, okay? A 1 cannot be an 8. Okay, so a 1 to them is a 1. So when we do base 10, we talk about how many 10s there are, but then we talk about how many more. So 11 is not a 1 10 and 1 1. 11 is 1 10 and 1 more. And if you always use that verbiage with them, it makes it so much easier for them to understand. So 63 is not 6 10s and 3 1s, it's 6 10s and 3 more. All right, because that helps them to understand that. And we started that dialogue, and it has worked so well with them. And so one of the activities we do is this. I used those opaque folders and just cut little squares out. And so one of the things we do for like a math fluency activity is I'll just take this and then just stick it over one of the numbers. And I'll say, all right, now somebody build that for me. And so I give them those base 10 blocks that you have on your table, and we just build numbers. How many 10s and how many more. And you would not believe how well they do with base 10 and what a good understanding they have. And when I say, well, what is 10 more? What is 10 less? What is 1 more? What is 1 less? Those things that you guys are doing in 1st and 2nd grade, they are really quite efficient with that in kindergarten because we've started the conversation early and because they have a good understanding. And I don't even start talking about counting by 10s, which is on our grade card. I don't even start assessing that until I've gotten to this point. Because if they can count by 10, that's fabulous. But if they don't understand what it means, there's really not that level of understanding there. You can also do it with these, and these came from that EAI website, and they're the magnetic ones that are base 10s. You can use base 10 in several different ways. There's the ones that are already the prefabricated ones, which are like these. And then you can use other things which you can just create out of whatever, 10 straws, 10, coins, 10 Cheetos. You can use anything that you want to. And then there's the ones that are not proportionate, which is your money and time. And that is why we do not teach time and money in kindergarten or first grade, because they still don't have that good grasp of base 10. And when you throw time and you throw money in there, it totally messes everything up, because money does not follow those base 10 rules, because the sizing and all those things are totally different. And time, of course, is not on a base 10 system. So that's something that really messes them up. But we use these too. So if we want to show numbers, then we do. These are my ones or my more, and then these are all my tens. So this is another really good way that you can do it. And something else that we've done is, this was another idea, and you can make cards for them. So if they're building and you want them to make the number 35, then you have 30, because what's a big disconnect that you see in first and second grade? It's when you say, well, tell me, if you take 25 and 20, explain to me how you got 45. And they'll say, well, I had the 5 and then I added the 2 2s. Now, you didn't add 2 2s, you add 2 20s, because they just see it as a single digit. So this is something that you can do, is make the little cards with 30, and then you have 30 dots on the inside, so they know that what 30 looks like. And then you add 3 more, and you just put it there on the outside, and now you have 33. And then all of your numbers match up. So if they go back to count to double check, they actually have 30 and 3. It's not just 3 and 3, it's 30 and 3. So it gives them a better understanding of what that place value really looks like. Does that make sense? Let's see, what else? I know we got a little bit of a late start, and I've lost my paper. Any questions? No? Does this make sense to everyone, the direction in which we're going?
Yes.
And the last thing that I want to share with you guys is what we've done. Then we've taken a lot of this base 10 and combined it with our number sense in order to become better mathematicians. And this is one thing that they showed us in training, and I thought, there is no way that firstly, I never thought they would do things like this, and they are. This is work, and I want to show you this. I'll pass this out. One of my students, I just gave them a 10 tower and this paper and a pencil, and I said, show me the ways that you can make 10. And I want you to look. She wrote the titles at the top on her own. Equation, number bond, and subtraction in her own writing. This was with no structure whatsoever, no support, no. And then this is all the different ways that she independently did 10 on her own. So, and you see how she wrote subtraction. Isn't that funny? Yeah. So once we got to that point, and once we've gotten past all this with our number sense and understanding how to decompose 10, and once we've gotten to base 10, and another thing I can show you really quickly is, this is a great way to do base 10. It's for those little guys, especially kindergarten. If you want to make your own base 10 blocks, then I use these pool noodles, and you can get them for $1. And you just cut them down, because they come as 46 inches. So you cut them down to 40 inches and then cut them in half. So these are 20 inches long. So these are your 10s. And then your 1s, then become 2 inches. And then you can use these for base 10. And then you can see when you build your 1s, they equal your 10s. And then you've got a great way of showing base 10 using a huge manipulative that they can actually wrap their hands around and that they like to use. And when you're working with decomposition and composing, then you've got 2 different colors of more. And it's a great way to show when you're decomposing 10 that 10 is maybe, 4 and 6. And you can stack them up, and show that 4 and 6 is 10 using the 2 different colors. So it's a really good way to do that. The last thing, however, that I want to show you, and I think that's all, is the distributive property. Because what do our students have such a hard time with when they're trying to solve? If we're doing math tasking, is finding the missing add-end, right? Because they have no idea how to get there, right? And my students, when we tried it and we were doing tasking a lot, I had to give them so much support because they really didn't have that knowledge. and they would just use trial and error. Okay, 10 minus what equals 3? 5. No, that didn't work. 4. Oh, no, that didn't work. And they just kept plugging something in until they could get to the right answer. Well, what we did is we found a way, and this was, not my way, but it was something that really helped me, because we have been doing the relationship between addition and subtraction and looking at fact families, because another thing that first grade teachers said is that they don't understand fact families when they get to first grade. So we used a lot of this information that we know and a lot of the things that we've been doing to see the relationship between addition and subtraction. Once again, when I taught subtraction, it wasn't hard because they already knew number bonds. And so if they already know number bonds, it's really easy to teach subtraction when they know addition. So even when I do something like this on the board, I can say, all right, so if we know that 1 plus 2 times 2 plus 3 equals 8, how would I write that as a subtraction equation? And my kids can write that as a subtraction equation. They can write 8 minus 1 minus 2 times 2 minus 3. So, I mean, that is, or equals, 8 minus 1 minus 3 equals 2 times 2, parenthetically. You know what I'm saying, right? But they understand it so well. So they're already doing fact families much better than a lot of the first grade because they understand the concept of numbers. So what we did is we said, okay, let's look at how we know, what we know about base 10 in order to solve for missing add-ins, because we're already doing really well seeing the relationship between addition and subtraction. So how can we use the relationship of base 10 in order to solve? So what we did is I would give them what you have on your table in this plate, and we know that good mathematicians, when there's a missing number, they use X to show the missing number, because that's something they're going to see forever and ever and ever when they start doing algebra. So we would do something like this. If you have missing add-in, and I'm just going to write it right here and then I'll show it to you guys. So if we have 15, and you can do this as minus or plus because it really doesn't matter if you're using addition or subtraction. 15 plus equals, and this one's kind of easy, but if you see 15 plus x, which is your missing number, equals 16, how are we going to solve that? We're going to look at how many tens and how many more in the number 15. How many tens are in 15? 1, right? So you're going to take your 10 and you're going to put it there, okay, as your first missing number. Because the first add-in that we know is 15, right? So how are we going to build that? That's going to be 1 10, right? You told me it was a 10. And how many more is it, friends? 5. So let's write that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 15 is a 10 and 5 more, right? Is everybody with me? Is that true? Give me a thumbs up if you agree. All right. Now, can we do anything here where the X is? No, because that's our mystery number, right? We have no idea what that number is. So let's leave that there. So you want to put your 10 and your more right there because this is your first add-in. Okay, everybody got it right right? All right, so what is our whole? 16. So that's going to be built down here in that hole. All right, so how are we going to build 16 using base 10? It's 1 10 and 6 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now double check that with me. Let's make sure we've got it right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So you agree that 16 is 10 and 6 more, right? Yes. What do we know about equations? That they must be balanced. So whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other side of the equation, right? So if I take my 10 away, right, from there, all right, so take your 10 away. What do I have to do to this 10? Take it away. So take it away. Now, how many more can I take away on this side? 5. So take all those 5 away. And if I take 5 more away on this side, what do I have to do on this side? So let's take 5 away on this in your hole. What's left, friends? 1. So what's your missing number? 1. So, is that true? Is 15 plus 1, does that balance that equation? 15 plus 1, is that equal to 16? Yes. And so now this is what we're doing in order to kind of build that. Yes. And that's using base 10, and that's using all of your number sense. So there's really a whole lot that you can do in order to build sense of number, counting, and cardinality in order to do a lot of problem solving. Does that make sense? So that's kind of where we started and where we've gotten to. And the last thing I want to share with you is that we have a new math series that we're going to be using in K1 and 2. And it will be such a wonderful thing for us. Because all we're getting is we are getting 6 of these that are our teacher's editions, and we're getting 6 that will be a workbook for each student. So, and they're all workbook size, just like this, all right? Teacher's editions are actually this size. They're not huge and spiral bound. I mean, they're actually going to be easy for us to take, with us home and things like that. So, and what these do is they are made, this was done in the state of New York when New York adopted Common Core. And they had a small group of professionals who worked together to create a curriculum that was not aligned to Common Core, but that was created around Common Core. So instead of taking a lot of extraneous types of skills that were already in a workbook and looking for a connection between the two, these were actually made and designed to teach Common Core standards. So what we're going to be doing is if you start with 1, they are actually intended to be taught from the beginning straight through to the end. Is that not incredible? And if you look, yes, and if you look at kindergarten, it actually starts with all of those things that are in the trajectory. Isn't that amazing? And so for your kindergarten teachers, chapter 1, module 1 is trajectory skills. And then guess where it goes next? Shapes. But guess why? Because if we can compare and we can look at patterns and we can look at the connectedness between things that they're already familiar with and shapes, then what can they do with numbers? They can do the same, because a lot of them don't have those base skills. So they're meant in scope to be very limited. You're not going to see a lot of extraneous things in there that we don't have to teach. They're very limited in scope to what is truly at the core of Common Core math instruction. And the sequence is truly sequentially logical in the way in which we would teach. All of your assessments are task assessments. So when you're doing this, it's not just computation, and it's not just filling in the blank, and it's not just solving 25 addition problems. They're actually all task-based. So you'll want to look at your task at the end. There's a mid-task and there's an end task. So you've kind of got a mid-assessment and an ending assessment, but they're not the same. Like your mid, it's not a pre-test, post-test kind of thing that you take in the middle of the year and then you take another one at the end of the unit. It's actually 2 different. If the unit's large, then it's actually has 2 different assessments per unit. And they're actually done accordingly, because look at this one. This one that's on, this is unit 2, which is on 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional shapes. See, it's not very lengthy. But the one that's number 1, which is module 1, numbers to 10, look at all that material that we have. So it's actually weighted accordingly to what we really need to spend the most time in instruction. So if you look at your task, then when you look at your task, all you need to do then is just go back and think, okay, friends, what do I need to do in order to make sure that we are ready for this assessment? So you're going to have to do a little bit of back planning. So look at your assessment, look at what their task is, and then think about what do I need to do in order to make sure that they're ready for that task. Does that make sense? So it's going to be good stuff, and it's going to make math actually much easier to teach, and it's going to be one of those things that if you have a walkthrough and you're doing Eureka Math, you don't have to worry about it. Right. So it's going to have all those components that we need in order to have that good, rich rigor in our instruction on a daily basis. And also, the other great thing about it is when you do lesson 1, module 1, it's not going to take 3 hours for you to do everything that it says that you need to do. And you have to pick and choose what you're going to do in that lesson and what you're not going to do in that lesson. So when you do So when you do lesson 1, you can actually do lesson 1 in about 40 minutes. The entire lesson in 40 minutes, and it's broken down for you. It's not scripted. Isn't that great? It's not scripted, but it does give you a very nice flow of what your objectives are and the different steps to get there, but it's not expecting it to be a scripted lesson. So it shows you, your problem. When you do an introduction, it might give you a review, which is 3 minutes, a 3-minute review. And then it gives you a 7-minute mini lesson of instruction. And then it gives you a 15-minute guided lesson that you're actually going to do with your students. And then it gives you an activity that might take them independently 10 minutes. And then you've got a 3-minute exit ticket or a wrap-up. So it gives you all the things that you need in order to teach it. And if you look, and you look through it, there's subitizing in there. There's all those things that we've been talking about that we need to do in order to make sure that our students are fluent. So it has all those things in there that we really want. So I think it's going to be great. How do you all feel about that?
Good.
Yeah, isn't that great news? And there's some back there on the tables. If you guys, what?
Can we have it?
We'll talk about it after. So if you want to look at those, and these are going to be at home schools also. So this will be a time that we'll actually have to thumb through those books and have a chance to look at them. There's K1 and 2 back there on the table, so if you want to pick up one and just do a flip through quickly. I know we've got places to be and people to meet and things to do, but that would be a great way just to familiarize yourself with it very quickly. Yes.
On here, when you're talking about kind of like what you did last year for math,
Yes.
so you did 1 through 5 for such a long time. I understand that. So and I know things are different because, schools do different things and then
Right.
we're out for Snowmageddon and
Right.
that. So when would be your time that you start 6 through 10? What was your average?
I'm trying to
time
remember.
in the
I
school
was
year?
doing 6 for an observation, and that was in December.
Okay.
So I had started 6 before.
So you started your little number talks with 3 in October. So you just did one every day or just one for that week?
I did.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and you can do, and they don't take very long at all.
Right.
And in the beginning, we did more with books and things like that. And now all I have to say is, when you finish with your journal, then go get your paper, go get your 10 towers, and show me ways to make 10. So now it's very easy. I don't have to do nearly as much because everything they're doing independently. But in the beginning, I would do a number talk one day. We do a lot of accountable talk. Probably we did it in that order. We did accountable talk first. When I would work through it, and then I would let them explain it to me, because if they can verbalize it, then it's much easier for them, to understand the process. So we would do accountable talk first, and then we would move into, secondly, then we would do more of our number talks. We did those for a couple of days, and then we would do a task, to make sure that they would understand exactly what was going on. Okay. Then we would start back over again, accountable. So that was the way that I did it. Now, is that the way you have to do it? No. But that was seemed to be what worked for me, because it kind of builds in my mind when I think about scaffolding. It builds from accountable talk to number talks to tasking, because tasking is more of your comprehensive, your culminating, do you truly understand it? So that's what we would do. And then I would start adding more things to it, because in the beginning when we were looking at 3, we didn't talk about commutative property or any of those kinds of things, but we did as we went, further along. And then when we got to 9 and 10 is when we started looking at fact families and the reverse operation of addition and subtraction, and did some of these things. I started this on the 100th day, because I thought, what better way to do it than on day 100, so that, and it was just random. I just thought, I'm going to throw it out there.
All their own bag of linking cubes, or do you work at group?
I do, I have 2 students that use those.
Okay.
So when they're doing that activity, they do it with a partner, but now when they're doing, what I showed you on that last piece of paper, I just give them all a tower of 10, and they just work on their own. But in the beginning, they did more partner work, just because it makes them accountable, and then they can double check each other's work. But it's real easy, because nothing that you need to do any of these things are extravagant materials or manipulatives that you don't already have. So it made it really...
My kids like working in groups.
Right.
I was just wondering.
And we did some anchor chart stuff, in the beginning, pick it and stick it, find your spot and stick to it, and task talk only and make sure it's in a whisper, and it took us a little while, but now they can sit and they'll work on equations for about 20 minutes and you will not be able to hear one sound because they love doing it. So it's a really great way, and what a great assessment. So
Do
but
you pick their partners?
I do, and some of them I have ability groups to where they're like 2 high kids that really need to extend for one another, and then in some I have like an average with a little bit lower, just based upon what they need. So that's what I've done, and it's worked. And they are such good mathematicians this year. It is amazing. I had teachers come from Anderson County. I had first grade teachers from within our school come and do professional development just in my classroom because they wanted to see what we were doing in kindergarten because they had no idea, what was happening and what we were doing. So it's been a really, really good thing. And I've grown professionally, and I've grown so much by doing this, and have really just found my love for math and teaching it, that it's amazing because you can see the same amount of excitement and the same amount of growth in this area as you can in their reading, and that's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. So, but anybody else have any questions? I appreciate all spending the day with me. I know this is not the best of days, and like Stacia said, I've got one more day in the classroom, and then I'm going to be gone the last 3 days because I'm going to be in Nashville. So I'm really feeling the stress of the end of the year. So because I have to have everything done a little bit more quickly than I normally do. Plus, I'm moving classrooms this year after 13 years. Yes, I've been in the same classroom for 13 years, and I'm moving this year. So lots of fun stuff going on. But I appreciate it. And look at those books, though. And if you have any questions, I'm open to, independent conversation if that's something that you would like. All right. Thank you, ladies. Thank you.